The Holy Gospel according to St. John, the 10th chapter.
Glory to you, O Lord.
Jesus said, "Very truly I tell you, anyone who does not enter the sheepfold by the gate, but climbs in by another way, is a thief and a bandit. The one who enters by the gate is the shepherd of the sheep. The gatekeeper opens the gate for him, and the sheep hear his voice. He calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. When he has brought out all his own, he goes ahead of them, and the sheep follow him, because they know his voice. They will not follow a stranger, but they will run from him, because they do not know the voice of strangers." Jesus used this figure of speech with them, but they did not understand what he was saying to them. So again Jesus said to them, "Very truly I tell you, I am the gate for the sheep. All who came before me are thieves and bandits, but the sheep did not listen to them. I am the gate. Whoever enters by me will be saved, and will come in and go out and find pasture. The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I came that they may have life and have it abundantly." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, O Christ.
So like many people in the congregation, I have been spending time getting ready for the yard sale. And I have begun getting ready for the yard sale by collecting up all of the abundance of stuff in my house that needs to go into the yard sale. In fact, I'm doing that here at church too. I always find with a lot of the staff too, we look around at all the stuff that accumulates at the church that really ought to end up going away and going into yard sale. So I have a project that I get everybody working on this time of year. I call Project GROSS. G-R-O-S. Stand for get rid of stuff. Yeah. Get rid of stuff. Because we always have this overabundance of stuff at our yard sale. Years ago, when I first came here and I was talking to some of the people that got the yard sale going a long time ago, they said to me, you know, we used to sometimes worry that we would run out of stuff. That we wouldn't have it, we would just get rid of all of our stuff and we'd have nothing more to put into yard sale. But they said after a while, they stopped worrying about that because there was always more stuff. Stuff just kept showing up. Sometimes that's because the same stuff that shows up in this year's yard sale was the stuff that you bought at last year's yard sale. I was talking to Charlie Stockman a few years ago. He does a lot of the work fixing up the bikes that we sell at yard sale. And he said to me, he says, you know, we don't sell any kids' bikes at yard sale. I said, what do you mean you don't sell kids' bikes? I see kids' bikes all the time. We sell lots of kids' bikes. He says, no, we don't really sell kids' bikes. He says, you come to the yard sale, you buy a bike for your kid rides it around for a few years and outgrows the bike, you bring it back to yard sale. It's more like a long-term rental program, which is the way it is with a bunch of our stuff. But for whatever reason, the yard sale always ends up with this superabundance of stuff. And most of the time, I think one of the good things about yard sale is that it reminds us about how much abundance we have. Even if it's simply looking at all the things that we have that we don't really need anymore. Because most of the time, even though I think all of us realize this at least intellectually, even the poorest among us has more than most people in our world, most of us do not usually operate out of a sense of abundance. We don't think and feel as though we have an abundance. Instead, most of the time, we think and feel and act out of a sense of scarcity. We think about how much we don't have. We think about how much somebody else has that I don't have, and we wonder if we're going to have enough. I know that frequently I end up thinking like that, and probably you do too. It's true that we may talk about how blessed we are because, it's polite to do that and everything. But even when I phrase questions in a way that sort of sounds like it's about abundance, I'm really thinking scarcity. Because I may say, gee, I wonder how much money I have. I wonder how much time I have. I wonder how many opportunities I have. What I'm really thinking is, I wonder how little money I have. And how little time I have. And and how few opportunities I have, and I wonder if those opportunities are going to go away if I don't seize them right now, or if my money will go away, or if I'll run out of time. I operate so often out of a sense of scarcity. And when we're living in times where things just don't seem to be as bright as they used to be, and when our lives seem to be getting more and more hectic, and when we wonder more and more about what the future is really going to bring, it can be really hard to live with a sense of abundance. So in today's gospel reading, when Jesus tells his first followers, and when he tells us, "I have come so that you may have life and have it abundantly," we may be tempted to sort of sit back and think, well, yeah, Jesus, that's really great, but how are we supposed to live with a sense of abundance in times like these? What is abundant life really all about? Abundant life. What does that really mean? I think it's instructive, first of all, to realize that when Jesus first said these words, he was speaking to a group of people who mostly were having a really rough time. They were people, almost all of them, who didn't have very many material possessions. They would have loved to have had all the stuff that we just put in our yard sale. They were people whose country was occupied by a foreign power. They were people who sort of suspected that things were going to get much, much worse before they got better. And it turns out they were correct in that assessment. So when Jesus starts to speak to them about living an abundant life, he is not talking to them about a life that's going to be filled with more and more stuff. And he wasn't talking to them about a life of ease without any kind of worries or problems. And he certainly was not talking to them about a life in heaven someday with God after you get through whatever it is you're doing right here on earth. Instead, I think what Jesus was calling his disciples to do was to live out and away from a sense of scarcity, and rather live into a sense of abundance. Because Jesus recognized what I think a lot of us do when we meet people and we say, wow, that person, they have so much. Maybe they have a lot of money. Maybe they have a lot of time. Maybe they have opportunities that I have only dreamed of. And yet, sometimes those folks still really operate and live their lives out of a sense of scarcity. Out of a sense of wondering whether it will all go away. Whether they're really going to have enough. So the key to living an abundant life is not to get more stuff, or more time, or more money, or more opportunities. It never actually works that way. Instead, I think what Jesus is calling his disciples to do is to live a life of abundance by really having a different kind of attitude and perspective about who they are and who God is. It's about seeing life as a gift from an abundant God who never runs out of blessings for us and who provides for us abundantly in each and every moment. You know, when we teach confirmation class to the kids, we teach the stuff that Luther wrote about the first article of the Creed, which talks about understanding God as our Creator. And when we think about, when Luther talks about, especially to adults, when he says, what does it mean to believe that God is Creator of all? He says, you know, you got to get beyond the stuff that we teach to the kids. You know, God made the sun and the moon, the stars and the trees, and all that kind of stuff, which is true and all that, everything. But that leads to a mentality that God did something a long time ago and then went away. Luther said instead, believing in God as Creator means that God is creating in you each and every moment. God is actually doing a new thing, providing for you abundantly with every breath you take. Every breath you take is a sign of God's new creation in you right now. That you wake up and you see the sun dawn on a new day is a new and abundant gift from God. Sometimes I don't have that perspective because I get caught up in that scarcity thing. or if it's not special, if it's not different than what you have, well, then I just ignore it. You are all taking a breath right now. The sun came up on all of you this morning. So I don't see that perspective of God doing that for me too. But when you start to get that kind of perspective, you can start to actually live the kind of abundant life that Jesus calls us to live, that Jesus wants us to see. He teaches us to pray every day to a God who will give us our daily bread right now, right here. Do we really believe that? Do we really see that? Do we really expect God not to be our reward at the final end of time, at the last judgment when we go to heaven? But do we expect to see God walking with us, providing for us abundantly, right here, right now, today? If we do, we start to live in to that sense of abundance. And part of what I think Jesus was calling his disciples to do was to have really a different kind of attitude. A kind of attitude that is really actually thankful and appreciative of all that we already have. And that also can kind of be hard because we get caught up in the scarcity mentality of what don't I have and what do other people have and things like that. But if you can really live with that sense of attitude, you start to live into a sense of a real abundance of what God is doing for you. So a couple weeks ago, one of our longtime, dearly beloved charter members died, and we had his funeral here. And Larry Spiker was the kind of guy who was always out there helping people out and doing great things. And when we had his funeral here, his son got up in the pulpit and he began by saying, "My father was a wealthy man." And if you knew Larry and you saw the kind of car he drove, you know that if we get $1 million bequest from Larry, I'm going to be absolutely shocked. That's not what his son meant. He said, "My father was a wealthy man because his family and his friends were his wealth. And he saw that each and every day. And he lived that and appreciated that." That's the kind of way that you can look at what you have that so many others don't. Appreciate that, love that, give thanks for that. And that's how you live an abundant life. And maybe the most important thing that Jesus is doing when he's trying to change people's attitudes and perspectives is he's also trying to change the disciples' way of living. Because so often when we get sucked into a sense of scarcity, we sit back and we say, well, you know what, I can't do anything. Because I really don't have enough time. And I don't have enough money. And I don't really have the opportunities that I need to do those kinds of things. And I don't have enough friends. All those kinds of things where you don't have. And that prevents you from taking what you do have and then going and doing something great with it. That's what Jesus was always calling his disciples to do. From the time that they sat there on the hillside and they said, "We just got 5 loaves and 2 fishes. We can't do anything with this." And he said, "Take what you got and go do something with it." That's how you live an abundant life. So I was really proud of our council. A few weeks ago, we were having the council retreat, and we were looking at what we're going to do this year and how we were going to try to move forward with things like our building program, where we have actually been doing really well, but we didn't raise as much money as we would have liked to raise. And the council sat there and said, "But you know, we got over 100 households involved in this, and we've raised over $500,000 in pledges and gifts. That's a lot. Let's take what we have and do something really good with it. Let's do something that makes a difference for our congregation, that makes a difference for our community, that now is going to actually give glory to God, instead of just sitting back and waiting for a time when maybe we have more, because living a life of abundance is seeing the abundance God's already given you and going and doing something with it. See, what Jesus was always trying to do with his disciples was to convince them that they served a God of abundance, a God who was never tired of giving more to them, providing for them each and every day, and calling them to share that abundance with others. And that's what Jesus is always doing in our lives as well. Because God has already given us an abundance of life. God has already promised us abundance for the future. And Jesus called to us each day is to recognize the abundance of the presence of God in our lives right now, to appreciate more fully all that God is continuing to do for us, and to take what God has already given us and to live our lives abundantly, right here and right now.